Everyone told me I should leave, that no one can hold on to a man who's lost all his memories, not even the woman who's shared his bed for the past 12 years. But if the person you love forgets who you are, would you walk away, or teach him how to love you all over again? Will Spencer, 38 years old, a former best-selling author who once stood at the peak of literary fame, now lies motionless in a hospital bed. His eyes are vacant, like the blank pages he once brought to life. Naomi, his wife, an art teacher, a woman with calloused hands from years of holding both brushes and brokenness, still holds his hand as if it's still warm. Will blinks and quietly asks, "Who are you?" Naomi smiles. "I'm the one who promised never to leave, even if you forget me 1,000 times." And now she must choose, stay or tear apart the memories that once held them together. Will didn't recognize her, didn't notice the ink-stained fingers, didn't smell the lingering scent of old books in her hair. "Who are you?" The question kept echoing inside Naomi's mind. She tightened her grip on his hand, trying to trace her way back to where it all began, a small library in a black neighborhood. She was sorting books for a lesson on American history. Her fingers brushed against the spine of Freedom Dreams, a book about imagining a more just future. A voice called out, "Can I borrow your laptop charger?" She turned. A white man with deep blue eyes, a wrinkled shirt, and a quiet smile. "What's your major?" she asked. "History." He hesitated. "And maybe a bit of the present, if there's time." She laughed, not because it was funny, but because something had just started to move. A week later, Will returned to the library. This time he didn't ask to borrow a charger, he simply placed a box of chalk pastels on her desk. "You once said you draw for your students. How did you remember that?" "Because you said it with your eyes." Naomi opened the box. Rare colors, burnt orange, olive green, midnight blue, exactly the shades she used to blend by hand. She looked up. "Where do you live?" Will glanced out the window. Across the street stood a row of old brick houses, the walls weathered with a century of wind. He smiled softly. "Not far from here." A pause. "But maybe in another world." Naomi didn't ask more, but something shifted inside her, a breeze she couldn't name, already sowing the seed of future unrest. Naomi adjusted her collar and took a deep breath. It was her first time at Will's home, an old mansion with iron gates and ivy-covered walls. The door opened. A platinum-haired woman stood upright, jewelry gleaming, posture unwavering. "You must be Naomi?" The handshake was cold. Not hostile, not warm, just polite enough to count. Will smiled, pulled out a chair for Naomi. The tea set was exquisite. Porcelain cups rimmed with gold, cookies aligned in perfect rows. Tea was poured for Will's father, then his sister. Naomi sat in the center, hands neatly folded on her lap. Her cup was poured. Last. She smiled, but her fingers tightened around the napkin in her lap, a perfectly folded white cloth, much like how she felt. Everything was flawless, except her. She didn't fit anywhere. Will sat in his father's study. The room smelled of aged leather and old wood. On the desk lay a pocket watch, passed down to him like a legacy. He opened the lid. The hands still ticked forward, but his heart moved in reverse, away from all the values he was raised with. Inside, an inscription. "Time reveals what love hides." Will placed the watch back in its case, picked up a pen and wrote, "If I lose everything because of her, then maybe it was never truly mine." Outside, Naomi waited. The yellow light spilled across cold tiles. She watched him step out, eyes quiet. No questions asked. Will took her hand, carrying nothing except a soft laugh, light and free, like the first breath of a new life. Early morning. The smell of fresh coffee still lingered. Naomi smiled as she adjusted the napkins on the tray. Will was still upstairs. She placed slices of toast on plates. A soft jazz tune played from the radio. Everything felt calm. Until, bang! A sudden crash. A sharp, sickening thud echoed down the wooden stairs. Naomi rushed out. Will lay motionless at the foot of the staircase. Blood pooled beneath his head. His eyes were open, but hollow. "Will!" Her scream tore through the quiet morning. Her trembling hands cradled his face. Her breath came in short, broken gasps. The morning breeze slipped through the cracks of the door. The breakfast tray crashed to the floor. Coffee shattered across the tiles. Outside, the shrill sound of an ambulance cut through the awakening sky. A storm was coming. The hospital room was cold and white, sterile to the point of indifference. The heart monitor beeped steadily. Not alarming, but not comforting either. Naomi sat by Will's side. Her hand rested on his, gripping tightly, as if letting go would make him disappear. His face was still, lids gently shut. The blood had been wiped clean, but the fracture inside her was far from healed. The doctor entered, a slow shake of the head. "The trauma's severe. If he wakes up, he may not be the same man." Naomi nodded. The words echoed in her mind, like a funeral bell, but she didn't cry. She only leaned down and whispered in Will's ear, "I'm still here, even if you don't remember who I am." And she stayed, hand in his, as if love was the only thing still alive in that room. Will opened his eyes. The white ceiling lights made him squint. The smell of antiseptic filled his lungs. Naomi sat beside him, tears brimming. She smiled, voice trembling. "I'm Naomi, your wife." Will stared at her for a long moment, said nothing, then slowly turned his face away, as if the woman before him was a stranger. Naomi's world crumbled in silence. Her heartbeat missed a beat. She stayed still, smile frozen, her lips pale. Behind her, Will's mother entered, paused for a moment, then leaned toward Naomi and said, barely audible, "Maybe it's time to let go." Naomi didn't respond. She only gripped Will's hand a little tighter, as if she let go, everything would vanish for good. Naomi had just stepped out of the hospital room when she caught a glimpse of a familiar figure gliding down the hallway. Camille. Blonde hair tied back, white dress perfectly pleated, cold eyes. Her heels clicked like a countdown. She walked into the room without looking at Naomi. Her voice, smooth and possessive. "Will, it's me." Will opened his eyes. Confusion turned to recognition as his gaze found Camille. He nodded slightly. Naomi stood outside, her hand pressed against the glass. She couldn't hear, but Will's eyes had already said everything. Recognition. A look he hadn't once given her since waking up. Her chest tightened. A question surfaced. One she wasn't ready to answer. Am I standing in the wrong place? In my own life? Naomi quietly opened the wooden cabinet in the living room. One by one, she took down their wedding photos. Her in an off-shoulder white dress. Will beaming beside her. Each picture, each smile, like tiny cuts on already thin skin. She placed them gently into a cardboard box, labeled it, "Before the Fall." Hope sat on the carpet, clutching a frayed teddy bear. Her tiny voice broke the silence. "Mommy, why are you putting away Daddy's pictures?" Naomi paused, pressed her lips together, then looked down at her daughter with softened eyes. "Because Daddy is learning how to love you again. And learning takes time." Hope nodded, as if she understood, but Naomi knew. Not everyone is willing to wait for a heart to return. And you, if the one you love forgets everything, would you stay or walk away? Leave your answer in the comments. The kitchen was filled with a gentle, spicy aroma. Valeria was making gumbo from her mother's old recipe. Caramelized onions, cracked black pepper, bay leaves blooming in a pot of simmering bone broth. Lucien stepped in, paused mid-room, and drew a breath. "This scent. It's never existed in this house before," he said, voice low and slow. Valeria set the spoon down and wiped her hands. "I want the food here to tell different stories, too." Lucien turned toward her. "What did you say?" She smiled softly. "Not every meal should taste the same. Some dishes are born from memory, from small kitchens, from brown hands that braved steam instead of silk gloves." He didn't speak, but he didn't turn away either. She was imprinting her identity into this home, not through paintings, not through speeches, but through the flavors of her childhood. Naomi opened the drawer in Will's old desk, searching for insurance documents. A stack of yellowed pages slipped out, the cover handwritten in blue ink. "Against all skins." Unpublished manuscript. She hesitated, then flipped to the first page. The handwriting was strong, familiar. It was a sociological study on race and class, but it was more than that. One line was heavily underlined. "She didn't take my place. She taught me the place no longer mattered." Naomi's chest tightened. Will had written about her, not just with his hands, but from the deepest part of his soul, back when love was intact, back when memory hadn't fractured. Under the quiet light, she placed her hand over the sentence. No words were needed. Her tears answered for her. Naomi sat in a wooden chair by the window, the manuscript resting on her lap. Her fingers gently stroked the curling edges of the pages. She reread the underlined passage, then whispered, as if only to herself, "You may forget everything, but I'll remember your part too." The words drifted into the room like a passing breeze, but behind the slightly open door, Will stood, silent. His hand rested on the doorframe, gripping it softly, his eyes filled with hesitation, his throat tight. He didn't walk in, he didn't speak, he just stood there, like a ghost wandering through a house that used to be his, because sometimes it only takes one person to remember for another to start feeling. Hope sat on the floor, clutching a crayon drawing. A simple picture, Dad, Mom, and her, holding hands beneath a slanted roof. She looked up, eyes clear but heavy with a question too big for her age. "Does Daddy still love me?" Naomi froze. She knelt beside her daughter, arms wrapping her close, as if she could gather every broken piece back into place. "Daddy loves you enough to learn all over again." Hope didn't reply. She just nodded and leaned into her mother's shoulder. The drawing slipped from her hands, landing softly on the floor, the lines still shaky, the people still together, but standing on ground that was starting to shift. Will sat still in front of a blank sheet. The pencil in his hand trembled, like his breath couldn't find its rhythm. He slowly sketched a few lines. Long hair, slanted eyes, a gentle face, the figure of someone. Unclear, but familiar enough to make him pause. A flash of memory. Golden afternoon light filtering through a window. She had been there, laughing, waving him closer. Will blinked. A brown paintbrush slipped from the corner of the desk, fell to the wooden floor. A small sound, but it startled him. He stared at it, unable to explain why, but something rose in his chest, as if he had just dropped something more important than memory. A notification lit up on the phone. From Camille. An old photo. Will and her, shoulder to shoulder beneath red autumn leaves. Will stared at the photo. For a long time. Not because he remembered, but because he didn't understand. The face in the picture was his, but the feeling was hollow. No laughter, no racing heart, just an image. He long pressed, deleted. The screen went black. In that moment, his face softened, as if a chill had lifted. He didn't know why, only that something in the photo felt wrong, and something elsewhere was starting to feel right. Early morning. Naomi placed the coffee cup to the left of the pastry, just like she always had. No words, just a quiet ritual. Then she left the kitchen. Will sat down. The smell of coffee wafted up. Not bitter, not bold, just enough. He reached for the cup. It was warm. He paused, murmured softly, uncertain. "You always made it, even when I'd let it go cold." Naomi stood behind the door, listening. She didn't come out, didn't say a word. Will looked at the cup again. Didn't drink, just let it sit, as if sipping it might make the memory disappear. But deep inside, something warm, something deeply familiar, was beginning to return. The kitchen was still. The ticking clock stretched each second like a question hanging in the air. Will's mother laid a check on the table. No pleasantries. "Start a new life. One that's easier. You don't have to fight so hard anymore." Naomi looked at the number. It was enough to change everything. Enough to leave and live comfortably, if she chose to let go. She picked up the check, held it for a moment, then tore it into pieces. The fragments fluttered down, like rejected offers never meant to be accepted. "I choose the hard way, because he's worth being hard for." Will's mother said nothing. She only stared at Naomi, as if for the first time she truly saw the woman standing before her. Will slept soundly, his breathing steady. The bedside lamp cast a soft shadow across the ceiling. Naomi sat beside him, her hand gently resting on his forehead. Her fingers traced his brows, the corner of his eyes, features she once knew better than her own name. She leaned down and whispered, "You once chose me, when everyone else said not to, when it cost you everything." Her voice cracked, but she kept going. "Now, I choose again, even if I'm alone, even if you remember none of it." Will didn't respond, just a faint, unconscious blink in sleep. But Naomi stayed, a promise made again, without a single word. Late afternoon. Hope pushed open the front door, backpack slipping off her shoulder. Eyes red, lips pressed tight. Naomi was tidying books at the dining table. She looked up. "What happened, baby?" Hope burst into tears. "Kids at school said I'm weird. That I don't look like anyone. I'm not white, I'm not black, I'm just strange." Naomi knelt, pulling her daughter into her arms. One hand rubbed her back gently, her voice calm, certain. "You're not strange. You're the child of two brave hearts, one that dared to love beyond what the world accepted, and one that dared to be born and live out loud." Hope stopped crying, buried her face in her mother's shoulder. Outside, the wind was shifting. But inside that little girl, something just got patched up. Have you ever felt like you don't belong anywhere? If so, what brave blood runs in your veins? Naomi discovered Daniel's medical file by accident, just a folded prescription tucked inside the drawer by the sink. His name, a heart condition. The warning signs were there. Surgery couldn't be delayed for long. She didn't say a word on the drive home. That evening, she returned, knocked on his door. Daniel opened it, his gaze as gentle as always, but Naomi didn't soften. "So, you were just going to let me fall in love with you, and then quietly disappear? Let me lose you without even knowing what I was losing?" Her words came too fast, too raw to hold back. Daniel looked at her, silent. Then after a long pause he answered softly, "I've spent a lifetime too afraid to love anyone. This time, I just wanted to love right, even if it's short." Naomi turned away, tears falling quietly. She used to fear that love might come and go. Now she feared something even more, that it might stay, but remain fragile. If you knew it would hurt, would you still dare to love? Naomi and Daniel sat on the porch, cloudy skies above. No words, just wind and the scent of old wood. Then Daniel spoke. "When I was 23, I loved a black girl." Naomi turned, surprised. He didn't flinch, didn't avoid her eyes. "My family didn't accept it. They didn't yell. They didn't disown me. They just stopped calling, stopped showing up for birthdays, stopped saying my name." 10 years, he lived surrounded by food-filled tables and hollow chairs in his heart. The girl eventually left, not because he didn't love her, but because he never fought to keep her. Naomi folded her hands in her lap. The silence hung heavy, like a chapter that hadn't closed. Daniel whispered, "I lost someone once because I was too afraid to stand. I won't let that happen again." History can repeat itself, or be rewritten, if this time neither of them lets go. Naomi didn't look at him as she spoke. Her voice was steady, but something trembled beneath her words. "You don't need to save me, Daniel." A simple sentence, carrying the weight of a lifetime spent being seen as someone who always needed saving. She'd been loved that way before, with pity, with default kindness, with hands that reached down only to vanish once she stood tall. Daniel was quiet for a beat, then replied, soft as air, "I'm not here to save you. I just want to stay." Naomi froze. Her heart beat louder. For the first time, no poetry, no promises, no proof required, just presence, uninvasive, uncontrolling, unconditional. She didn't respond. She just stayed, letting the silence speak for her. Naomi sat alone at night. A single lamp lit the room. Her pen moved slowly across the paper. Each word felt carved from the heart. "I used to live for duty, for being a wife, a mother, a good person. I held myself up, for others, for stability, for what I was supposed to be. I learned how to endure. But I never learned how to live for myself." She paused, breathing deep. Her eyes fell on an old photo on the shelf, a younger Naomi smiling stiffly at a crowded party. Then she continued, "Now, I want to live for feeling, even if it's fear, even if it's weakness, even if it's love. I choose not to run anymore, not because I need someone, but because for the first time, I choose me." She folded the letter, wrote no recipient, but the quiet smile on her lips was already an answer. Naomi pushed open the gallery door. It creaked softly as the breeze followed her in. The space was unchanged. Crooked paintings still caught the light. The scent of old wood and stale coffee lingered. But one thing was different. Daniel was there. Seated on the bench by the window, his hands trembled. His eyes were clouded, red from exhaustion, or something deeper. He didn't speak when he saw her. She didn't ask. Naomi walked slowly toward him, careful, as if any sudden sound might break the moment. Then she sat beside him. Wordlessly, she reached out and took his hand. It was cold, dry, weak, but it squeezed back, just a little. That was enough. No explanations, no justifications, and that was everything they needed. A dirt path led to a small clearing on the hillside. There, a newly built wooden cabin stood. Simple, bare, but full of promise. Will held Naomi's hand. Hope skipped behind them. Each step felt heavy with emotion, but lighter with hope. The creaky wooden door opened. Inside, bare walls, sunlight pouring through curtainless windows. Will turned to Naomi. From here, we start over, not from what used to be, but from what we still have. Naomi looked around. Her eyes paused at a patch of light on the wall. She imagined a painting there, not of the past, but a memory just about to be born. Hope ran ahead. Her laughter filled every empty corner. On the wooden floor, Hope sat with brand-new crayons. On a blank sheet, she drew 3 figures, hand in hand. A simple roof, a bright orange sun in the sky. In the corner, she wrote carefully, "Us again." Naomi looked at her daughter, then at Will. She said nothing, just reached for his hand, as if it had finally returned to where it belonged. Will stepped forward, lowered his head, and kissed Naomi on the forehead, his voice deep, slow, words long kept inside. "You're the most beautiful memory I have, and if I have to love you from zero again, I will, without hesitation." Naomi closed her eyes. There was nothing left to hold back, because the most important thing had found its way home. Late afternoon light skimmed across the lake. The place where he once proposed now held only wind and a small wooden table under a tree. On the table, a blank journal lay open. Will held the pen. His hand still shook a little, but this time not from doubt. He wrote slowly, clearly, "To the woman I chose, even when I forgot why." Naomi took the pen next. She read the line, smiled gently, then wrote beneath it, "To the man I never stopped waiting for." Together, they looked down at the page. No need for new vows. Because this love, even when forgotten, had never been lost, and the once blank journal now had its first line, written by 2 hearts that had never truly left each other. Dusk settled over the land. The 3 of them sat on the porch of their new home, golden light drifting across their hair. Naomi turned to Will, eyes quiet, but shimmering. "Do you remember everything now?" Will held her gaze, didn't rush to answer, then gently shook his head, but his voice was steady. "No, but I remember. I chose you, and if I had to, I'd choose you again. Every morning I wake, every night I close my eyes." Naomi couldn't hold back. She buried her face into his chest, her fingers gripping his shirt like it might all disappear. Hope ran to them, wrapped her arms around them both. They sat like that, no one left out, and for the first time after so many days waiting, they laughed. Softly, but truly. Some love doesn't need memory to survive. It only needs one person to believe, and one to stay. We had lost each other, forgotten why we began, but we chose each other again. With hearts that had once broken but were still brave enough to love again. A new family photo now rests in the frame, not to replace the old one, but to begin a new chapter. If you've ever chosen love again, leave a message. I still choose love. And if you believe in the quiet miracles still left in this hurried world, share this story with someone who might be waiting for one. Don't forget to follow this channel, because here, we tell the stories that make your heart stay.